What's up, everyone? Aaron Nagler here with your Packers Daily Chat at Cheesehead TV. Wherever you are on the internet, that's where we are because we are devoted to Green Bay Packers fans worldwide. Hope it's a great day wherever you are. It's a cold one here in New York City, but that's to be expected in mid-January. Hello to everybody in the comments and the chat, and good to see everybody. Facebook, YouTube, what's up, people? How you doing? BJ Raji wasted Mike McCarthy's prime. Brett? Perfect. I don't think I need to continue. I think that covers everything. I jest, of course. Everybody talking about the running game, the hiring of Hackett as the offensive coordinator. I saw someone asking to get hyped about Hackett because all they've heard is bad. And I'm not quite sure what sources you're reveling in there when you're talking about Hackett as an offensive coordinator, but he was very much a scapegoat in Jacksonville, given Blake Bortles to work with, and did pretty great work with him actually last season, getting them to the AFC Championship game, obviously falling to the Patriots on the doorstep of the Super Bowl. This year, things fell apart once Fournette got hurt. There was some other issues at play, but look, wherever Hackett has been, his teams have had a really strong running game. And I suspect that's one of the reasons LaFleur valued his input and wanted him on board. This is a team that I think is going to be, if not centered around the running game, it is going to put much more of an emphasis on the running game than we've seen in these last several years under Mike McCarthy. That's not to say they won't throw the ball. They won't throw it around the yard because I think they will. But I think a lot of this offense will be predicated upon what they do on the ground. And I think Hackett will be a big part of that. William, no QB coach as of yet. Cignetti was reportedly, or will reportedly not be retained. Tom Silverstein reporting that earlier this afternoon. Not a surprise. It sounds like Hackett will also be working with Rodgers and the quarterbacks quite a little bit. So I'm all for it. After a year in which there were a lot of voices in the room, offensively and position-wise, run game coordinator, pass game coordinator, wide receivers coach, et cetera, all giving their opinions, all offering input, what have you. They have more of a streamlined process. I'm pretty much all for it. Now, obviously, they're still looking to hire a wide receivers coach, and it sounds like Ben Simmons, the running backs coach, will be retained. I think that's good news. But as far as needing a QB coach, I don't think it's necessary, especially when you have a veteran like Rodgers. But I do think they'll keep an eye open. I don't doubt that the look for adding to the offensive staff is not completely shut, but I don't think it's a necessary component or a dire need by any means. Do you think we look younger to replace Mo Wilkerson or try to re-sign? Maybe both, Matt. We'll see how free agency shakes out. Obviously, there's a long way to go with re-signings and tags regarding who's available. I think they would most likely, given that Pettin's going to remain as defensive coordinator, I would suspect they would welcome bringing Wilkerson back on a cheap prove-it deal, given that he's coming back from a pretty significant injury. But we'll have to see how it plays out in these next couple months. Do you think Darren Rizzi will sign on as the Packers special teams coordinator? Well, Ryan, the fact that he left Green Bay without a contract would suggest that he'll definitely be talking to other people. Certainly it means that the Packers didn't offer him something he couldn't refuse, he couldn't, not sign, etc. We'll see. It doesn't necessarily mean that he's out of the running or that he's going to sign someplace else, but it does risk someone else offering him a contract when he's in to interview wherever else he goes, and the Packers being left out in the cold, so to speak. Will Cobb be back, or do we go with younger receivers? Aaron, I've said pretty much all season I will be very surprised if he is retained unless it is on a very team-friendly deal. I suspect they'll let him hit the market, and Cobb will find a deal out in free agency that will pay him much more than he's going to be able to get in Green Bay. Now, that could all turn around. Maybe they do agree to terms on some kind of new deal, but that emotional scene that you saw before the finale, Rodgers hugging Randall Cobb with tears in their eyes, etc., that pretty much points to the die has been cast. Cobb knows he's on his way out. Again, you never know. Maybe they do let him hit free agency and he doesn't find a deal that he thinks it's to his liking, so to speak, and they welcome him back on a team-friendly deal. That's a possibility as well. So we'll see how it plays out, but I would suspect that Randall's played his last down in Green Bay. The janitor at Lambeau would be an upgrade over Zook. Hey, some of the custodial staff in 1265 Lombardi are no joke. Their football acumen, second to none. Would you consider Jags and Titans offensives quote-unquote creative last year? Ben, I would call them limited by personnel in both instances, especially with injuries down the stretch in Tennessee. That's the thing. Keep looking at what guys did at their last stop. It's a body of work. Mike McCarthy coming into Green Bay, everybody looked at the poor offensive rankings in San Francisco. Well, look what he had to work with. You go back to his time in New Orleans, and it's pretty damn prolific. Now, obviously, with LaFleur, you don't have a real body of work to draw from as a play caller, but you do have his work on other offensive staffs and the quarterbacks he's worked with. With Hackett, you can see strong running game components wherever he's been. And with Hackett's history, you can also see really poor quarterbacks that he's been given to work with pretty much at every stop. So you have to look at everything, totality. And really, when it comes to Hackett, I'm not so concerned about creativity or play design or whatever, because that's going to very much be LaFleur's kind of imprint and stamp. Obviously, he'll get input from everybody on the offensive staff, but that's going to be his baby. And anything we see out of the offense will, ultimately the buck stops with LaFleur on that. Let's take a look over on the old tweet machine, shall we? See what's going on. Twitter, questions people have. Good one right off the bat here. Could the Packers refinance Zook's contract, dead money, if they hire him to another position like advisor or maybe ball boy? That's pretty funny, but no. First of all, he's been fired, so they're not restructuring anything. Second of all, there's no dead money involved. They have to pay him. There's no cap involved when it comes to the coaching staff. The cap only applies to players. So they fired him, so they got to pay him. It's as simple as that. Two quick questions. One, how much of a say does Matt have over the roster being a new coach with a new system compared to Goody? Number two, will he revitalize the screen game in Green Bay? We used to be the kings of the screen. Yes, Matthew, they were. Under Holmgren and Sherman, they ran the screen to deadly effect. That certainly went away under McCarthy. It wasn't something they emphasized, although they would hit a good one every now and then. Your first question, he will undoubtedly have some say. He will undoubtedly talk to Gutekunst on a daily basis. They will look at the offense and the defense he wants to implement and the kinds of players he wants in his program, et cetera, et cetera. But ultimately, it is Gutekunst's call. He has control and final say over the 53-man roster. As far as, will he revitalize the screen game? TBD. We'll see. It all depends on how much he emphasizes it. I would suspect yes, but it's very early in the process. Amir asks, do you think the success of Rodgers and the Packers this upcoming season will have a big influence on the consideration for drafting a quarterback in the earlier rounds of the 2020 draft? That's a really interesting question, and I would suspect the effect would be minimal, regardless of how they fare in 2019 as far as standings and their record. I think Gutekunst, he has a 5-year deal. He's 1 year into it. What does he want to do? He wants to make sure he's here in Green Bay, past the 5th year. I would suspect that if there's a quarterback prospect that he loves, that he thinks is a difference maker, a once-in-a-lifetime prospect, or just a blue chipper, he's not going to hesitate to pull the trigger if he feels the value is there. Now, that said, if they're sitting there in the late first, say they've won a lot, they've made the playoffs, they make a run, whatever, and he feels there may be a player away on one side of the ball or the other, does that mean he'll bypass a quarterback if one is sitting there that he likes? I would tend to doubt it, but there's a long way to go in all of this, obviously. But for Gutekunst, it is his job very much to look to the future and to ensure that the roster doesn't fall apart, so to speak, because it doesn't have a quarterback. And we've seen that happen when Rodgers has gone down a couple times. So, I don't think it'll have a lot of bearing, but you can't dismiss it entirely. What kind of offensive innovation would you expect in the new Packers offense with LaFleur and Hackett working with Rodgers compared to Mike McCarthy and Philbin? Well, Jesse, we touched on it a little bit ago, but I wouldn't expect a ton of innovation in the sense that we're going to be looking at stuff and going, oh my God, no one's ever done that before. Now, we'll definitely be seeing things we haven't seen in Green Bay in a while, and or ever, in regards to bunch sets, jet sweep stuff, maybe misdirection, etc. But it's funny that I put a post up at Cheesehead TV earlier this week where LaFleur, in an interview on the team website, talked about, was asked about his offensive philosophy and what he's going for after, what we can expect from it. And, he said, point blank, to begin with, that it will be predicated on their zone run scheme. That sounds familiar. And the illusion of complexity, whereby they run a lot of the same concepts out of very different formations and personnel groupings. Well, I could pull a lot of clips and quotes from Mike McCarthy saying very similar things. It's just how they go about implementing those ideas. I think you'll see a lot of the kind of thing you've seen either in Kansas City, in LA, in San Francisco, or in Atlanta a couple years ago with Shanahan, where there'll be a lot more window dressing and a lot more motion, a lot more variation, but a lot of the concepts will be pretty similar. I mean, everybody makes fun of the slant flat thing, but I think you're going to see a continuation of a lot of slant flat. You'll just see it run out of a lot of different formations. Let's head back over to the live chat, shall we? CM3 will go to the Browns and Cobb. That's a possibility. They certainly seem to be building Green Bay East over there. The latest report, Joe Witt Jr. set to join the Cleveland Browns coaching staff. Yet another former Packer heading over there. Now, let's say hi to the folks on Facebook, shall we? What's going on, people on Facebook? Oh yeah, hey. That's my talking. I don't want to hear that. I want to see your chat. See your comments, folks. I personally feel, what do you feel, Ryan? Ryan, I got to know, what does Ryan personally feel about the future? I feel pretty good about Ryan feels pretty good about the future. Well, Ryan, I don't see why you wouldn't. I mean, you got a new coach, new GM, 1 year in at least, got an overturn on the staff. I mean, everything that Packer fans complained about for so long has all been taken care of. Thompson, gone. McCarthy, gone. Defensive coordinator, Dom Capers, gone. So, here you go. Now is the time to embrace the hope that the NFL offers on an annual basis, because right now, the Packers are a clean slate for the most part. All this about scheme, presence, commanding the locker room, what I'm reminded of is how important it is for LaFleur to be able to adjust in-game. Dan, that's a really good point. I would tend to agree, especially in today's NFL, where things are presented on game day that you weren't expecting, unscouted looks, the way both sides of the ball have to be able to adjust. And I think that was the real downfall for the Chargers this past weekend. They came in with a game plan, I don't know why or how, against the Patriots that was tailor-made for the Patriots to do what they do best. And they were completely unable to adjust when it came to kind of disrupt anything New England was trying to do. And in the other game, you look at the Colts and the Chiefs. The Colts had no idea how to handle the Chiefs' offense. So those are the types of things where, LaFleur obviously is an offensive coach, but he's got to be able to say in-game to his defensive coordinator, to Mike Pettin, look, even though I'm, you've been doing this coordinator on the defensive side of the ball a long time, but this is my team, and you need to adjust to this, to what they're doing. Suggesting things, saying, okay, well, I want a lot more of this or a lot less of that, etc. That's going to be his gig now. And that's one of the bigger differences from being a coordinator. Robert, what are you looking for from Cheesehead TV? Oh my gosh, people with requests here. Still looking for a Cheesehead TV coffee mug. Later this offseason, we will have a reset, redesign, relaunch, and including some Cheesehead TV swag. So be ready. Any chance Clay Matthews re-signs at a hometown discount, or does he test the market? I suppose there's always a chance, but sure sounds like, from the quotes we got from the locker room throughout the year, start of the season all the way through the end, sure sounds like a guy who's ready to test the waters, so to speak, of free agency. Again, much like Cobb, I wouldn't shut the door completely, but I tend to think he'll be playing elsewhere next year. Third contracts, especially on the defensive side of the ball, are a rare thing in Green Bay. Darrell Bevell, yes, Martin. Darrell Bevell's back in the division. He's the offensive coordinator with the Detroit Lions now. Bevell's been everywhere in the North at this point almost. So welcome back, Darrell Bevell. Hopefully you'll pass again on the 1-yard line, not give the ball to your power back. Any thoughts on who you think the special team coordinator will be? I have none. I mean, I know they're talking to guys, but it's going to be hard to say until we get a better idea of who they're interviewing. Obviously, they let Rizzi go and didn't offer him a contract. We'll see who's next. While you're revamping swag, I want a sacrilegious t-shirt. Okay. Do you think Mike McCarthy was too conservative with play calls? He could be at times, but I also think he got caught between a rock and a hard place a lot because people would say, oh, he's so conservative, and then he'd be aggressive, and people would be like, oh, he's so aggressive. Why is he being so dumb? He's way too aggressive here. People are never happy, essentially, unless you're winning, and then no one cares. That's it always comes back to the NFC Championship game in Seattle, right? McCarthy was so conservative. Well, sure, at the end, he played the odds, he played the percentages, and Brandon Bostic came back to bite him. But ultimately, he played the percentages, and they should have won that game. It's hard for me to kill McCarthy for that. Now, was he too conservative? Yeah, probably a little bit, but on the long list of things that happened in that game for them to lose, like McCarthy's conservatism is way down on the list. There are a million things that happened in that game. And in McCarthy's career, really. But, oh boy. I don't even know what that's about. Will we re-sign Mercedes Lewis now that we have his former offensive coordinator Hackett? Jay, after Mercedes kind of sojourned into the media side of things there, at Yahoo with Martellus Bennett, I would be surprised. Now, I'm not going to. Obviously, he was critical of McCarthy and his offense, and McCarthy's out the door now, so you would think maybe not. But I don't think the organization as a whole appreciates when a guy walks out the door, is a free agent, and then starts talking bad about any member of the organization, past or present. So we'll see. I wouldn't completely rule it out, but I'd be surprised. I want the first Nagler's Never Right t-shirt. Well, James, I wouldn't hold your breath. But I will say, speaking of Nagler's Never Right, there will be a podcast coming this off-season, so to speak, which will be exclusively on our Patreon page, including some very special guests that I'm lining up these kind of weeks here leading up to the Combine and what have you. So if you're not a member of our Patreon, make sure you join so you can hear some exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else, as well as supporting what we do here with the chats, with Packer Transplants, which will be coming back for the off-seasoner show a couple times this off-season. Really, you're supporting everything we do at Cheesehead TV. I can't thank you guys enough. Ed Donatel to Denver. Thoughts? Nate, I'm all for it. You did really good work in Chicago with their defensive backs. Anything that hurts the Bears is fine by me. And for them to lose both Fangio and Donatel, that's a good thing for the Packers. I want a freaking Packer man. Daniel, they're available on the internet somewhere. Do you think Matt LaFleur will be aggressive in free agency and trading? Well, that's not really his call. That is very much up to Gutekunst. Now, he will undoubtedly make suggestions, give ideas as far as what he's looking for, etc. But that is all Brian Gutekunst. The roster is his baby, and roster construction. Any fears that after the complete overhaul over the past 2 seasons, plus Murphy firing McCarthy midway through the year, that Murphy and the Packers may become too knee-jerk and reactionary? I don't have any concerns about it, Frank. I understand what you're saying. The firing of McCarthy, you say halfway through the year. I mean, they have 4 games left, right? The firing of Mike McCarthy, though, will always sit poorly with me, in the sense that there's no real precedent for it in the history of the organization. And because of Murphy's continual, constant reiteration of allowing things to play out, saying, these guys have a good track record of working out through, starting slow and working things out, etc. Obviously, they weren't doing that this year, but the difference in firing McCarthy after that Cardinals game and firing him after the Detroit game would have been negligible to my eyes. Obviously, there was a malaise over the franchise. I can't, deny that. But that is the one moment in his tenure that, to me, feels really reactionary and impulsive. Outside of that, most of this has been coming for a real long time. I mean, Mike McCarthy had been in town for 13 years. That is an eternity in the NFL. And obviously there was friction and something going on between him and Rodgers. You had just paid Rodgers, so it was pretty clear Mike's time was getting short, especially when they gave him an extension in secret, So to your question about is it a fear? I don't think so, because I think Murphy's actually done a very good job of not being reactionary throughout most of his tenure. I do think firing Mike was the one time he has been, and I think it was really unfortunate. But for the most part, I think he's been a very good steward of the organization, and a lot will come down to how these two guys do, how Gutekunst and LaFleur are in their positions. But ultimately, I don't think he's going to be what we've been privy to these last, say, 16 months or so. This will be the outlier when it comes to most of his tenure as CEO of the Packers. That's my hunch. That's just guesswork on my part. That's how I feel about it. Mark Murphy needs to stay away and let Brian run the personnel. I can guarantee you he is. How's that? Guarantee you he is. 100% Aaron Nagler certified. That's all I can offer you. Aaron, do you think this is an offseason that Brian Gutekunst needs to hit? Alex, yes, 1,000%. Been saying it probably for the last couple months. It all sets up where, look, I think Gutekunst was handed a tough hand in that he knew, undoubtedly, where the roster holes were and the depth issues were. He did what he could to paper over some of it going into 2018, but he also knew what was coming off the books in 2019. And he set them up in a way where they could have made a run, and they were close. They were so close so many times throughout so many games in 2018 where you saw how things could have worked this year. But you had key injuries. Obviously, Rodgers getting hurt in the very first game of the year, an injury that lingered all year. That doesn't help anything. But then to lose two of your three top wide receivers in an offense completely predicated on those wide receivers working with the quarterback, and then the issues at guard on offense, all of that added to a mix that was just too tough to overcome. Now, if everybody stays healthy, I think it's a much different scenario. And there's a good chance Mike McCarthy isn't fired. But all that did happen. But now, you look at where they are, the amount of cap space they'll have, all the extra draft picks, including an extra number one, no matter if it's at the bottom of the round, he is fully loaded to make it his team. Rather than having to deal with lots of poor drafts, which he absolutely was. A lot was made this season about the poor drafting towards the end of Thompson's tenure. That has been well addressed. Obviously, some of those guys will still be on the squad, but for the most part, heading into 2019, it will be Gutekunst's team. This is the offseason where he will really put his stamp on it. And, the pressure's on. That first year, he had a little leeway because of what he was handed. After this offseason, it is very much his baby. Geronimo have a big year this coming season? Daniel, I would doubt he'd ever have a monster year. Maybe he has somewhat of an outlier if somebody else gets injured and he has to play a lot more snaps, etc. But I don't think he's ever going to be a huge numbers guy. That said, Aaron Rodgers absolutely loves throwing to the guy. And he's shown time and time again that he trusts him implicitly. And that is huge with 12. But, it's a new offense. It's going to be a new scheme. Who knows how they'll deploy those guys as far as how much they're on the field. MVS, EQ, those guys aren't going to be twiddling their thumbs. Don't forget Kumaro. Any one of those guys could gobble up some snaps. So he's going to have to work his butt off and get back in that rotation. But as far as big numbers, the only guy I ever see having monster numbers is Devontae, just because of basically he's their best wide receiver and he's a guy that Rodgers is going to look to feature. But again, I think there could be weeks where he maybe coverage is rolled Devontae's way and they're taking away the running game and Geronimo has a big game. But I don't think he's ever going to consistently be a big, huge numbers performer. Jamon Moore was plagued by a lack of talent in 2018. Very much disagree. He was plagued by drops in the summer, that's for sure. We're wasting J.K. Scott's prime, Julian. a man after Corey Behnke's heart. Did the Packers do Nick Perry's talent a disservice by moving him from his hand in the dirt to standing? Daytone 2. Well, Matt, I think that's been argued ad nauseum over the years. I think Perry very much would have been much more suited to a 4-3 end in the NFL, but he's shown that he can be productive. That year before he got paid, even with a club on his hand, he got to the quarterback with some regularity. Regularity in bunches, let's put it that way. And he's shown that he can hold up against the run, etc. Is he the most fluid athlete in the world? No, I don't think anybody would mistake him for that. But do I think he would have been better suited for a 4-3? I don't think that's a revolutionary or controversial stance. I think a lot of people, a lot of talent evaluators thought that as well. Is this the year we finally show Bulaga the door? I doubt it. Maybe if they deem he's just not worth the money, given that they know he's going to miss some games regardless, maybe they move on, but who do you replace him with? You better know for certain what you got in the draft and or on the street in free agency, because when Bulaga's on the field, he's still pretty damn good. So, yeah, we'll see how it plays out. I would tend to think they'll bring him back. I'm still mad. Brian Gutekunst passed on Tremaine Edmonds and Derwin James. How could he be that incompetent? Oh, see, you were doing fine until you said incompetent, because that's just silly, and that completely negates everything you just said. Incompetent? Really? He made a choice for value to drop down. He still got Jair Alexander and another first-round pick. It's just ridiculous to say he was incompetent. I wanted Derwin James. I was upset when he didn't take him. That doesn't make the man incompetent. Can we let it play out a little bit? Can we see who they get next year with that extra pick? What if they package that pick and they jump up in the top 5 and get like some ridiculous prospect, and then you're doing cartwheels on draft day? Is he still incompetent then? Just breathe, man. Don't go talk radio on me. That's all I ask. Let's not mess with our offensive line and the studs we have. Tend to agree. They do need help, though. How are you? Tone Loke, what's up? What do you think may be the biggest change to our offense with the new coaching staff? The biggest change, I think, will be the emphasis on the run game. And while I still think they'll be, predominantly zone-oriented when it comes to their blocking scheme, I think you'll see much more emphasis on it. I put it up there on Twitter this morning when Ryan Grant was here in this here studio during our watch party. He said, I'm paraphrasing, but that when he spent a month in Washington under Kyle Shanahan, they spent more time on the run game in one day than they did for an entire week when he was in Green Bay. That tells you the emphasis that Shanahan was putting on the running game, and you saw it in action wherever Shanahan has been. I think LaFleur will be very similar. I think you've seen it in LA now with the Rams. McVay down the stretch here has very much emphasized the running game. Everything else is flowing off of that. I think you've seen it wherever Shanahan has been, and I think LaFleur will be very much the same way. I think everything will be predicated off of what they do on the ground. And guess what? That is only going to help and enhance the end of Rodgers' career. Very much what happened with John Elway at the end of his time in Denver. That's what I think is setting up here for Aaron Rodgers. And I'm not saying he's going to win 2 Super Bowls and walk off into the sunset, but I do think it is very much going to help him in the latter part of his career. All right, everybody, I'm gonna jump. Thank you all so much for joining me. Make sure if you're on Facebook, share it with your friends. Like, subscribe on YouTube, and like I said earlier, Patreon, $5 a month helps everything we do here, including upcoming podcasts this off season with some very special guests that will be only available to our Patreon patrons. So thanks a lot, everyone. We got a special treat coming for you tomorrow. Producer Gaff, who some of you may remember from some earlier watch parties this season, Gaff and I are going to be previewing the championship games. That's right, we're going to be doing 2 Madden previews tomorrow. We're going to be doing Chiefs-Patriots, we'll be doing Rams-Saints on the YouTube channel. Make sure you're there for that. We'll have tons of fun. Corey will be there. We'll be chatting with you guys, playing the games, having a ball, drinking some beer. What's up? That's how we roll. We're Cheesehead TV, devoted Green Bay Packers fans worldwide. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a great night.